What's up, everybody? Rob here. So, there's something particularly evocative about combat sports. Two men in a ring or in a cage determining who's better. There's no teammates, there's no passing the buck on. It's just you against your opponent, and we're going to see who comes out on top. Now, in the long and very storied history of boxing's heavyweight championship, there are some names that are absolute legends. Guys like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Mike Tyson, Jack Dempsey, Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, and a whole litany of others. Well, it all had to start somewhere, and this is a very brief biography of the world's first heavyweight champion, John L. Sullivan. And yes, he is the source of the overly manly man meme, and just make of that whatever you will. John Lawrence Sullivan was born in the South End of Boston in 1858 to Irish immigrants. He was originally intended to enter the Roman Catholic priesthood, and to do this, he enrolled in Boston College. But eventually, the siren of pro sports were far too hard for him to resist. Only a few months into his college career, he began playing baseball on a professional level, earning an unheard of amount of $30 to $40 per week. Inflation's a hell of a thing. Eventually, this somehow, I honestly don't see how, but this led to a career in boxing. I mean, I personally don't see much crossover between the two sports, but hey, what do I know? So in any case, he quit Boston College and went on tour, offering prizes to anybody that could beat him. He reportedly was undefeated in over 450 matches. He was also arrested several times since prize fighting was illegal at the time. Now, boxing did become more accepted as his career went on, but there was still always some stigma attached to it. And now is pretty much as good a time as any to go to the tail of the tape. John Sullivan was 5 feet 10 and a half inches tall. He had a reach of 74 inches, and I could not for the life of me find his weight anywhere, though I'd imagine be around 200 pounds, give or take. I mean, he was a fairly well-built individual, not overly muscular or overly bulky. Later in his career, he did put on a lot of weight, so I guess it did fluctuate a bit. But yeah, overall, but I still really could not find his actual weight. He fought in the orthodox stance, which basically means left lead, and he was right-handed, pretty typical. And as far as his fighting style goes, it was pretty much just charge straight in and swing away at his opponents. Just tuck his chin in and just go straight in. And this is where he got the nickname the Boston Strong Boy from, mostly because he would just charge straight in and just use overwhelming force and his superior strength to just overwhelm his opponents. Later on in his career, he would describe his method of fighting, or he would describe fighting in general as it's pretty simple. You just go in there and you just hit the other guy until he falls over. There's really not much more to it. So, yeah, not a lot of strategy, not a lot of, bobbing and weaving and maneuvering, flow like a butterfly or stinging like a bee. It's just going out there, getting within range of your opponent and just smashing them. All right, so I'm going to now try to explain the professional career of John L. Sullivan. It's going to be kind of confusing here and convoluted because there are no sanctioning bodies, unlike today. So, how he became the heavyweight champion is somewhat confusing and convoluted, but here we go. So he managed to claim the American heavyweight title. Again, there was no real sanctioning body at the time. It's just something that people claimed. This was in 1882 when he defeated Paddy Ryan. Again, no real sanctioning body, but he became the American heavyweight champion. He defended the title multiple times throughout the years, fighting against multiple American opponents, and he became the international champion. Again, no sanctioning body here, so it's semi-unofficial. But he defeated a British fighter named Charlie Mitchell in France in 1888. This made Sullivan an international champion and basically made him the first international heavyweight boxing champ. And that's pretty much where the idea came from. Some say it was the fight in 1888 against Charlie Mitchell that made him the international champ, but it was certainly confirmed in one of his most famous matches, and that was in 1889 when he had a 75-round match against Jake Kilrain. And this was the last fight to ever be sanctioned under London prize fighting rules. Now, very briefly, there are two different sets of rules for boxing during this particular era. There was the London prize fighting rules, and then there was the Marquis of Queensberry rules. Now, to briefly go into the rules of London prize fighting, they are completely different from modern-day boxing. They were to be conducted in a bare-knuckle fashion, so there was no protection for the hands. And also it included a range of things like grappling and holds, although any kind of grabbing to the legs was seen as a foul, as well as blows below the belt were also a foul. Also, the round system, probably the most striking difference is the round system. It wasn't on a set timer necessarily, like modern day boxing or later on the Marquis of Queensberry rules. But a round ended when a man was knocked down by a punch or a throw. So if you just pick up a guy and you throw him, and he hits the ground with, I think it was 3 points of contact, I'm not positive. But in any case, if a guy hits the ground, the round would end, regardless of how long it would take. And then the man would then be given 30 seconds to rest, and then afterwards, he would then, after that 30 seconds, he would be given an additional 8 seconds to come to this, what's known as coming to the scratch, which was basically a line that was in the center of the ring, and he had to toe the line. He had to move up to it and place his foot on the line in the center of the ring to show that he was ready to continue fighting. So he would then square off with his opponent, and then the next round would start. There would be no limits to the amount of fights, and the fight ended when somebody was either knocked out cold or, after the end of a round, he was unable to come to the scratch. There would be no countouts or anything like that you see in modern day boxing or under the Queensberry rules. So with no limit to the amount of rounds or the length of the rounds, big 75 round epic matches would really not be that uncommon. So in the 1860s, there was the introduction of the Marquis of Queensberry rules, which our modern-day boxing rules are based off of. For example, the biggest difference between this and the London prize-fighting rules was the use of boxing gloves, which were made of leather at the time, and they offered limited protection, especially compared to what we have today, but it was at least something. Also, there are other things that are very similar to modern-day boxing as well, such as no throwing or any other kind of strikes. The only legitimate strike you can perform is with the knuckles of the closed fist, so basically just punching, no wrestling or hugging or anything like that, no grappling allowed. The round system was not based on knockdown, but instead based on a timer, which would be 3 minutes in duration with a 1 minute rest between rounds. And also there was the introduction of the 10 count. So if a guy gets knocked over, the ref would count to 10, and if he can't get up unassisted, at the count of 10, he would be counted as defeated. Now, there are a couple I don't want to go too much into it. There are a couple differences between modern day boxing and Marquis of Queensberry rules. Again, they're very similar. For example, nowadays we have something like the standing 8 count. The concept of a technical knockout, or again, fighter safety is much more important now than it was back then. So there's the 3 knockdown rule, which if you're knocked down 3 times in a single round, it counts as a TKO. So you're still not knocked out, but you're technically knocked out. Like, they're going to call the fight for your own safety. Going to a neutral corner at the end of a knockdown. These are all modern day variants, but it's still what you see on pay-per-view today is really just based on the Marquis of Queensberry rules. Now, what does this have to do with John L Sullivan? Well, Sullivan is seen as a link between the bare-knuckle boxing days under the London prize-fighting rules and the newer Marquis of Queensberry rules. He fought with both rules, and actually by the time of his great bare-knuckle fight against Kilrain, he was already a Marquis of Queensberry fighter, or had fought in Marquis of Queensberry contests. So in 1889, the match against Jake Kilrain made Sullivan the last bare-knuckle boxing champion in world history. Kilrain spent most of the fight picking up Sullivan and throwing him, which would cause an end to the round. Sullivan got frustrated with this, and he eventually started complaining to the ref that, you make this guy stand and fight. I'm here for a boxing match, not just have him, throw me to the ground every 5 seconds. It's getting annoying and frustrating. In any case, he eventually did manage to keep his distance while pounding on Kilrain. Being just bigger and stronger, he just managed to just smash him repeatedly. And this went on for 75 rounds. Again, a round was based on a knockdown. Any case, at the end of the 75th round, Kilrain was in pretty bad shape. He was bruised and bleeding and just generally a giant mess. And he tried to get up, but then his corner man threw in the fight, threw in the towel because Kilrain wanted to keep going, but the corner man said, no, if you go out there again, Sullivan's going to kill you. He was that close to death. And even years later, he would say, I made the absolute right call on this. He would have absolutely died if we went out there. So with his victory over Kilrain, his status as world heavyweight champion was secure. Sullivan would carry the title for the next 4 years completely unchallenged. He wouldn't step in the ring, though he would spend his time supporting other fighters. During this time, though, he started to decline physically. He turned to overindulgence in both food and, more importantly, to drink. Even during his fighting days, Sullivan had a weakness for whiskey, and yeah, he would sometimes sneak out of training. Instead of train, he would go to the local pub and just get completely plastered. Had a great weakness for whiskey, apparently. That was his favorite drink. Any case, it was starting to take his toll on him. So 4 years went by without a fight. He got rusty, overate, overdrank, and he now completely out of shape. He defended his title against this guy here. This is Gentleman Jim Corbett. In 1892, the two men fought each other, and yeah, it was pretty obvious that Sullivan was way out of shape for this sort of thing. The match was fought under the Marquis of Queensberry rule, so they had gloves on, and yeah, this is really one of the first major boxing matches of what we can consider today the modern era. It went pretty simply, the match. Sullivan kept charging in, and Corbett, being younger, faster, and not under the influence of alcohol and vast amounts of food, would just smash away and dart out before Sullivan could engage him. In the 21st round, Corbett dropped Sullivan with a strong left, and Sullivan was unable to rise before the 10 count, making Corbett the winner. Upon his recovery, Sullivan would state, "If I had to get licked, I'm glad I was licked by an American." Well, after this loss, Sullivan did participate in a few exhibition matches, but for the most part, his career as a professional boxer was over. He did go into several other jobs as well, being a baseball umpire, a stage actor, a bar owner, and a few others. And also, he eventually did kick the alcohol habit and spent the remaining years of his life as a proponent for prohibition. He would insist that if it wasn't for whiskey, he could have actually beaten Corbett. Whether this is true or not, who knows? It's one of those hypotheticals that we can never really answer. But he really wanted to do is reach, especially the youth of America, and tell them, look, even someone as great as I am, could be laid low by whiskey, and look what happened to me. I want you to avoid the same mistakes I did. In spite of all this, the effects of overindulgence led to his early death in 1918 at the age of 59. Now, like I said before, because there were no sanctioning bodies at the time, his exact record, his exact career is really hard to pinpoint. But generally speaking, his record is believed to have 40 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. 34 of those wins are by knockout, though, again, there is some disagreement because records are spotty, there's no sanctioning bodies, and it's all just a giant confusing mess. In spite of all of this confusion, he is considered by most boxing historians to be the first world heavyweight champion, and he is the founder of the lineal title, the man who beats the man who beats the man. It all starts with Sullivan. So I hope you found that interesting and entertaining. I know I did. I'm not a big sports fan, but for some reason I just find boxing history to be a very fascinating topic. In any case, more videos will be coming out whenever I get around to it, so please hit the like and subscribe button, and the notification bell too if you want. I'm not going to stop you. And yeah, that's about it. Have a good day. Or don't have a good day. You're adults. You can have any kind of day you want. See you later.